All right, we got to hurry along here. In James chapter 5, verse 7, James talks about patience. So I want to get moving on this, right? Patience is my nemesis. I'm terrible at it. I'm watching The Chosen. I don't know if you've watched The Chosen. I'm about 4 or 5 years behind, I think. And so I've been watching The Chosen, and Jesus keeps saying soon. And I'll ask about something. When's this going to, what's soon? And I'm like, it's kind of the ongoing joke now in the show a little bit, because he keeps saying soon, and nobody knows exactly what that means. And so anyhow, patience is what we're talking about today. So I should have just brought a mirror in and had it right here, because it's really, this is for me, and hopefully you can take something away from it. This is our topic, our subject today. I want to talk about how you can honor God and how you can worship God through cultivating patience. It's a big, big deal. I want to start verse 7. We're going to read through a few verses here of chapter 5. If you've got your own Bible, if not, it's on the screen for you. Here's what he says. He says, "Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop of production, right? How patient he is for the autumn rains, for the spring rains. You too be patient. Stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." It's happening. Don't grumble against each other, brothers. Like, you're going to be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers is an example of patience in the face of suffering. Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Remember, a long time ago, the prophets who spoke in God's name. As you know, we consider those blessed who persevered. You've heard of Job's perseverance, character from the Old Testament in the Bible. You've heard of Job's perseverance. You've seen what the Lord finally brought about in his life. The Lord is full of compassion, and he's full of mercy. Now, patience, I think, is one of those things that every one of us wants to have. I mean, I don't think anybody takes pride in being an impatient person. I've never met that person who's all excited because they're impatient. It's like, hey, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? And it's like, well, you know, I'm married, and I love sports, love hockey, and I'm super impatient. Like, nobody does that, right? That would just seem really weird. We've never heard that. I think the good news is that patience can be developed. It's not like you're born with it or you're born without it. It can be developed. This is something we can work on. The level of patience that you have today is not what you are stuck with. That's not lifetime. This is the deal. You can become a patient person. We all can. It's something that we can all grow in, and that's the very good news. The bad news is that the way that we typically develop patience is we get put under pressure. We get put in the fire a little bit, so to speak, right? And that's where patience is developed. We get put in a situation where our patience goes, and it goes as far as we can, and then it gets to a point where we go, rats, I don't see it anymore. Right? I get to that point where the pressure is too much, it's too much heat, and all of a sudden I don't. So we can develop it, but this is how we develop patience, is we're in circumstances and situations where the pressure's turned up. So what is patience? Well, patience is it's a peace in the face of adversity. It's peace in the face of trials or difficulty. One dictionary defines it as enduring a trial without panicking. I kind of like that, all right? The ability to endure a trial without freaking out, right? That would be a pretty good definition that I think most of us would understand, that I can endure something without freaking out. The opposite of patience then would be I'd get all upset. I'd kind of lose my mind or lose my marbles or whatever. I'll get all stressed out and amped up and whatever, maybe all angry even sometimes, right? When James says be patient, what he's saying is be calm even when you feel like you cannot. Be calm when you feel like losing it. When it seems like the situation is such that you got to freak out, be calm. This is what God wants for you. This is what God wants for each one of us, is that we could be calm in the face of that kind of pressure. He wants us to be able to come to a place where there is a relaxed confidence. That sounds pretty good, eh? Relaxed, I think we can all relate. That sounds good. And confidence. Confidence is another word for trust, another word for faith. A relaxed trust, a relaxed faith. Now, don't think of that as being a passive thing. Relaxed sounds very passive, but it's not a passive thing. We know it's not passive. In those verses, he's praising the perseverance of Job. And there's a word in there that he uses, that word perseverance, that we're familiar with. If you've been around here for this series, from the very start of this series, we used a word that I define. It's hupomene, and it's a Greek word that is translated hyperstand. You remember that? Those of you who were here a few weeks back? Hyperstand. That we're going to take a stand, that it's almost an aggressive type of thing. So it's not passive at all. And so James says, you guys, you gals who are reading his words, including us here today, you've heard of the hyper stance of Job. You've heard how he took a stand. You've heard of the fact that Job let God build perseverance in him. That's something that Job was working on himself and God was building in him, and Job was welcoming it. This is something that very early on in James, he actually has already introduced to us. We're already in chapter 5, and it's the last of the chapters there. But he said earlier that, when troubles and trials and suffering and adversity comes your way, that stuff hasn't come to destroy you. It's come to help develop you. It's there to help build you. It's not just a passive thing like, oh, well, it is what it is kind of deal, right? No, there's a strength there that can give you the ability to have that relaxed confidence in the face of difficult circumstances. A couple of months ago, we preached a series here that was called The Illusion of Control. And we discovered that ultimately, you and I, we're in control of very little. There's very little that God has put us in control of. We want to be in control of all kinds of things. We think we're in control of all kinds of things, but there's very, very little that God has given us control over. One of the things we are in control of is you and I are in control of our reaction to circumstances. You're in control of your reaction to situations in life. And when life kind of gets crazy, as it does sometimes, right? Sometimes it just kind of feels like it's getting a little off the hook, right? When it gets kind of crazy, you are in control of your response to the craziness that life can become. And to the extent that you have confidence in God, that you trust God, you will be able to flex a muscle that James refers to as patience. Patience. And then life can become a gift. Even crazy life, even brutal life, even life that feels like I'm stuck in this trial, I'm stuck in this adversity, I'm stuck in this, it's full of difficulty, it's full of twists and turns that even that life can become a gift. And you're like, what? There's another translation called the Message version. I've read from that a few times here in this series. It's a more contemporary language version that translates the Greek into English in ways that hopefully helps us be able to understand and apply. And here's what it reads in verse 11 there, the very end of that chapter, or that section we just read. What a gift life is to those who stay the course, who don't give up too soon, in other words, who are patient. It's because God cares about everything, right down to the last detail. In that sense, I think we can lean into the sovereignty of God as our good creator, as our great Father, that He is good and that He has a plan. That He has a plan for you, He has a plan for me, He has a plan for us. He's up to something in this world. And so we can have that confidence, that relaxed kind of confidence, that patience. We can have serenity in the face of adversity. We can be patient people. Again, Mears right here. The goal of Christianity, you've maybe heard this before, we've said it here multiple times, goal of Christianity is to become more like God. We're striving to look at the model of Jesus Christ so that we can become more like God, more like Jesus than I am today. That tomorrow I can be more like Jesus. That 6 months from now, somebody might see in my life that, hey, something's changed in your life and it's for the better. You're more loving. You're a more patient person. You're a better father. You're a better husband, whatever it is, right? Now, that's the goal of the Christian life. We're striving to become more like Jesus Christ. Now, that's why it becomes so easy for us to become impatient. Because we're striving for this, We want to. As followers of Christ, it's like we're looking for this, and it doesn't happen in the way that we anticipate or the way that we sometimes want. And then God comes along, and God will allow difficult things to happen in my life and in your life, and He will use those things and work those things for His good purposes, that we might be more conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. And we go, but I don't like that plan. And it's like, well, that's the plan of God. You can't be conformed. You can't be changed. You can't be refined, to lean into our name here as a church. You can't be conformed without pressure. Pressure reveals who we really are. We see that all the time, whether it's in sports, or it's in politics, or it's in the neighborhood, or it's in your kids' deal, or school, whatever it is. We see it all the time. God is seeking to build us, to change us, to conform us into the image of His Son, Jesus Christ. How does that happen? Pressure. Pressure. It happens when we go through the fire. It happens when we face adversity, when we face trials in life, when we face difficult times. How do I know that I'm becoming more like Jesus Christ? How do any of us know that we're becoming more like Jesus Christ? We're becoming more patient because God is patient. So James says this. He starts right away. He says, be patient. That's the very first words he says here. Be patient, not just with your circumstances, not just with all the stuff that's going on around you. You know, this went wrong and that went wrong. If I told you my list, you would be like, oh my goodness. And then you would tell me your list and I'd be like, oh my goodness, of all the stuff that's going on in life, that it's like, how am I supposed to be patient with all of that? How am I supposed to be patient with him or her or them or this or that, whatever? And James is saying, don't just be patient with circumstances in life. Be patient with yourself. This can be, I think, one of the most challenging things because it's usually pretty slow to grow. We're like a smoker, you know. It's low and slow kind of thing, right? Now you're going to start thinking of brisket and ribs, and I've lost most of you now. But we can become so impatient with ourselves because stuff's not happening faster. I keep coming to church. I keep attending. I'm in small group. I'm trying to read my Bible. I'm trying to pray. I'm trying to do these things. And I'm not growing. I'm not seeing the things that I want to see. It's like, why am I not changing the way that I think I'm supposed to in the time frame that I think it's supposed to be happening? Why is it not happening faster, right? It can be so challenging for us. We don't get it quicker. We think we should be further along in the process. You talk about 6 months, and I'm like, well, it's been 6 years, right? And it's like, why am I not feeling like I'm moving along here? We think we should be in different places than sometimes we find ourselves. We have to be mindful of the gaps. In London, you get on the subway there, and they remind you multiple times, mind the gap. Some of you have been there, have done that, right? Mind the gap, right? Mind the gap. You got to be mindful, or you'll get stuck in the train, like you land in the gap. But we have to be mindful of the gaps in our life. The gap of where I am today and who I am ultimately becoming. I need to be mindful of where I'm at today and who and where I'm ultimately looking to go. And in that waiting, where sometimes there's only just little incremental growth at a time, there's a huge temptation for us to become impatient with ourselves. It's like, I don't want incremental. I want big growth, and I want it now kind of thing, right? That's the definition of patience, right? We need to have confidence. James is saying this, and he would say it if he was standing here right now, that if we keep doing the right things, if we keep leaning into God, if we keep doing these things that help us grow as individuals and help us stretch our faith, that we are going to see growth. If we stick with it, we will see growth if we don't give up. Now, James offers us, I think in here, at least 4 different ways to think about patience. 4 different sort of lenses to view patience through. First thing he tells us is that we need to be patient like a farmer. Like a farmer. I don't know how many farmers there are amongst us here today, but I think we understand some of the agricultural system that our world operates on in terms of that that role. A farmer understands that there's seasons. He mentions that the farmer waits for the harvest. He waits for the good crop to come, right? And he has to wait patiently. And he even mentions he has to wait for the early rains and he has to wait for the later rain, right? Like there's a spring rain, there's a fall rain that he describes in there. In Israel, the early rain would come sometime around October. The later rain, it comes around March, April kind of thing. So a farmer understands that there's a time to sow, there's a time to reap. There's a time to plant, there's a time to harvest, right? And so the farmer understands, and this is what James is getting at when he's talking to and writing to an agricultural community at that time. The farmer understands that you've got to do things so that you're ready when the rains come. So that the seed's in the ground in order for the rain to hit it. So that you're there to harvest once it's ready and fully grown and stuff. You need to, as a farmer, you need to be like back here. You got to start planning and scheduling for what's to come up here. You've got to be ahead of the game so that you know that today I've got some things that I need to do in order that tomorrow I'm going to be able to realize these good things in life. So this is the same as your life. It's the same as my life. And James would say that waiting is not wasting. We can be using those waiting periods. He's talking about the farmer and those waiting times, right? That patience. And he's like, you can use that time. You can be in those waiting moments and you can be developing what will be useful for you down the road when you get to the harvest time, is this illustration. And this is what I want to encourage you with. When you have something in your mind that you're seeing happen or that you want to see happen and you're striving to grow, you want to be a more loving father or a better spouse or whatever it might be, when you have something in your mind that you want to see happen and you're so impatient with it and so impatient, this is taking too long. I can't believe it. Like, why is this not right? I don't like how it's happening. That's often how we might respond. I don't like it. I'm impatient with the circumstances. I'm impatient with the person. I'm impatient with the situation. James would say, ask yourself, what can I be doing now so that I will be more grateful then? What could I be working on right here in that waiting period so that when I get there, I'm better prepared and I'm full of more joy when I get there? Sometimes we just have it in our heads that something's coming and all we have to do now is wait and wait. Like, I've planted the seed and now I'll just put my feet up and wait. Well, what farmer would do that? Nobody. A bad farmer, a farmer who's no longer going to be a farmer after one season, right? You can't do that. You can't just throw the seed in the ground and then take a hike and put your feet up. There's something coming. There's something that we can be doing during the time of waiting, that building of patience, instead of just waiting. Instead of that, actually asking ourselves, okay, what can I be doing now? So that when I arrive, or so that when this happens, I'm grateful when that day shows up finally. Think about the farmer, James says. If a farmer only spent his time planting the seed and then stressing and obsessing over that, and is it going to grow and what's going to happen, and boy, I hope so, and I'll check on it later, like in a few months, right? Like, that doesn't work. If you only spend your time doing that and you're worried about the potatoes, I like potatoes, so I'm going with potatoes, okay? This is what's been planted in this particular farmer's field. Lots of potatoes. You can do so much with potatoes. Now we got brisket and potatoes going. But if you just planted the potatoes and then didn't secure transportation for when those potatoes actually grow and show up, oh, I never even thought, I forgot to do that. And they're here and they're ready to go and you're not ready to go. If you didn't do that, if you didn't negotiate some kind of agreement or a contract with a grocer or a purchaser or vendor to be able to sell that product, to be able to sell what you've grown, I mean, the farmer doesn't just wait and stress and obsess. The farmer actually does things. There's arranging going on. There's some navigating happening. There's all the things that need to be done so that when the time comes, you've taken care of business in that waiting period. It's not passive patience. You think about relationships. If you're single here today, maybe you go, oh, I sure wish I had a boyfriend. I sure wish I had a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, whatever it might be. But what can you do? Well, I can tell you what you can't do. You can't force it. You can't force it. But you can work on yourself. You can develop yourself. You can develop yourself into the kind of person that the sort of person you're looking for is probably going to be looking for. Does that make sense? Instead of just obsessing about things and like, oh, and what's happening, and just work on yourself. There's a preacher named Andy Stanley, and he says, be the person that you're looking for is looking for. I like that. Be the person that you're looking for is looking for. It's like being a farmer, James says. There's some things that are kind of out of my hands here, right? But what can I do to develop? What can I be working on in the meantime? What can I do to be sort of proactive in all of this? What can I do about the things that are in my control, the things that I do could get my hands on and stuff? I can be patient, but I can be patient proactively, if that makes sense. James says, wait like a farmer. And then he says, wait like a family. He doesn't use the term family, but he does talk about no grumbling. Nobody's family grumbles, do they? There's no family grumbles that ever go. But he says, no grumbling. He says, you got to wait like a family. You get impatient with yourself. We know we can get impatient with other people, right? Every guy knows that when you ask your wife, how long until you're ready? She says 5 minutes. And that's like Jesus saying soon, right? It's just like, what? And every lady knows that when you ask your husband, when's that game going to be done? He says like in 5 minutes. Like, right? And then there's overtime and there's this and there's like, we can be very impatient with one another. We can grumble with each other. We can complain towards each other. And it can cause us to lash out at one another. It can cause us to be extremely unkind. You've been on the receiving end. You've probably been on the giving end at times. But never forget, James is saying that every single one of us is trying to grow. We're all on this journey. Life and relationship with Jesus Christ is a process. It's not flip the switch and poof, I'm the perfect person. Have you met one of those? They don't exist. We're all on a journey and it's a process. And God is working in your life through His Spirit to build you up, to build us up. So James says, don't be impatient with one another. That would just be nuts. You all know Billy Graham, right? Great evangelist, preached gospel all over the world, right? Millions of people heard the good news about Jesus Christ because of Billy Graham. There's a story, true story, about Billy Graham and his wife. They're driving along one day and they came upon road construction. Unheard of, right? They come upon some road construction. And they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. You know those things where dudes are just standing there with the sign and it says stop. And if they spin it, it'll say slow. And you're just, please spin that sign, right? And they're waiting. They finally get through this construction. They get to the end of it. And at the end of it, there was a sign that said, end of construction. Thank you for your patience. And Billy Graham's wife, Ruth, turned to Billy in that moment and said, you know what? When I die, I want that on my tombstone. End of construction. Thank you for your patience. True deal. If you go Google it, because you're probably not going to North Carolina. But when she died, they put that on her tombstone. End of construction. God's been working on me all my life. It's been a process. It's been building. It ended. End of construction. Thank you for your patience. Whew. If you have it in your mind that everybody that you are so easily frustrated with, your kids, your coworker, your spouse, your sister, your brother, your mother, your whatever, everybody in your life, if you have it in your mind that there is an image of that person that Jesus has in His mind, that Jesus sees that person the same way that He sees you and me, that there's this image of, oh, that's who I created. That person's so amazing. If we get that image in our mind, they're under construction now. We all are. So we need to be patient with each other, like we should be in a family that loves one another, especially within the church family. As we think about what are we doing to help one another become more like Jesus? What am I doing to try and encourage you? What are you doing to try and encourage the person next to you, or the person who's back in Kids Zone, or the person who's across the room from you? What are we doing to help one another become more like Jesus? Wait like a farmer. Wait like a family. And he says, wait like you know the future. And the future he's speaking about is how this thing all ends. And it ends with us standing before God. This whole world, this whole life, it ultimately comes to a place where we stand before God. And James puts it this way. You remember this from those verses that we read at the start? He says, the judge is at the door. The judge is at the door. And of course, we know that Jesus spoke about his second coming more than once, that he's coming back to this world, that he's coming back to establish his kingdom, that he's coming back, and he said that could happen at any moment. Nobody knows. Nobody knows when. We have no idea when it could happen. James says then we should always live with the expectation that if his first coming caught some people off guard, which it did, then oh boy, his second coming will as well. And we should be patient. Like we know that any moment, this could all wrap up. This life that we're in right now could all come to an end at any moment. And we will stand before God. We should be patient as if we understand that that's the future. And if we're doing that, then we're going to use the gifts that God has given to us. If that's the mindset that I'm going to start now using the gifts, I'm going to strive to be more patient, more loving, more joyful. I'm going to try to bring more people along to Jesus Christ to get to know him, to put more love into our world. You know, in your little corner of the world, that could be with your spouse, that could be with your family, that could be with your school, whatever it is. Help people, help our friends, help our family members come to know Jesus Christ if we live with that mindset. See, the enemy is always going to try and get you to focus on what you don't have instead of focusing on what you have in front of you. That's always the case. Satan's always trying to get us to focus on what we don't have instead of what's in front of us. What can you do with what you have been given? There's a character, Joseph, in the Bible. Some of you are going to be familiar with Joseph. He had a real colorful coat, right? He's that Joseph, and he you know, he's a really interesting guy, really amazing guy. How easy it would have been, without me getting into his whole story, but how easy it would have been for Joseph to be impatient. Joseph had a dream that he was going to be a great leader one day, and he told his brothers about that dream, and they hated him for it. And they beat him, they took his coat, they threw him in a well, they were going to leave him to die. They eventually sold him into slavery. I mean, they treated him, they mistreated him. It was terrible stuff, right? He had every right to be impatient. But God allowed all these different situations in his life that came his way. These pressures, these trials, these sufferings, these going through the fire stuff, because God uses that stuff to help shape us in all kinds of difficult circumstances. What we need to remember is when we're going through one of those difficult times, like Joseph had so many, they just kept hitting time after time, you need to remember that the process is the product. The product of your life is the process that you face in your life. The what you want to be, the who you want to become. Joseph, he's a young man, and he's dreaming, and God gives him this dream that one day he's going to be a great leader. It's his vision that he's going to be this great leader. And this is the finished product, that Joseph, you will be a great leader. You're going to do great things. But he had no idea the difficulty that he was going to go through in order to get there. He had no idea what was about to happen in his life for years and years and years. Joseph understood that God was shaping him, and his life went on, and he got thrown in prison, and he was falsely accused, and he did, just all kinds. God was shaping him in all of these things. God was working in him in all of these things. God was constantly doing something in his life. The process is the product. That thing that you were hoping to see in your life, it might be the very same reason that God has allowed some very difficult things or some trying things to come your way. We're not seeing it that way, we're hoping for, we're praying for, and God says, okay, we're going to get there, and here's the plan. And we're like, I don't like that plan. Or we don't even see the plan because we're just mad at the circumstances and the situation. Oh, your prayer has been heard. Sometimes God answers our prayer with trial. Sometimes God will answer your prayer with difficulties. The very thing that we want Him to do in us, on the inside of us, sometimes He will bring difficulties our way to do that very thing. And then life becomes a gift if we're patient and we stay the course. This is what Joseph understood. It's what he knew. He was patient like he knew the future. I'm going to stand before God. The judge is at the door. Finally, James tells us, he says, you need to be patient like your forefathers. Just wait and be patient like your forefathers. And then he looks back to Israel's history. He looks at all these different prophets that have come and gone beforehand, right? Like they've been following God, and a new prophet comes along, and then they pass away, and a new one, and they're following God, and all. He's basically saying, let's look at this showcase that is the result of patience. In fact, here's how he says it. He says, brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. That's right from those verses we read from the beginning. Take a look at those prophets. You think about your favorite Bible character right now. I don't know who it might be, Elijah or David or Paul or Esther or Samson or like whoever it might be. But you think about that individual right now and you ask yourself the question, does any of their story not involve suffering? Did any of their story not involve suffering? Nobody remembers those three characters, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they were amazing young leaders and hearts who were for God. They remember those guys because they got thrown in a fiery furnace. We remember them because of the pressure that they faced. We remember them because they got the heat turned up on them, literally. And they stood fast, patient. David had to face a giant. David had to face a lunatic of a father-in-law who tried to kill him for like a decade. That's what we remember about the pressure moments, the times where he stood firm in the midst of adversity. Esther in the Bible, her mom and dad both died when she was a little girl, and then there was this maniac who tried to kill every single person on earth that she was related to. Like, not a joke, that's exactly what happened. This is what we remember of her. When the pressure was on, when she had to go through the fire, James is saying, listen, I know that there are times when everything in your life seems just cruddy. Been there. Where everything just seems, there's adversity everywhere. James says, I get it, but remember the stories you know and love. Remember your forefathers before you. Remember those who walked this journey ahead of you. Remember, they were people who were patient. They didn't freak out. They cultivated patience in the face of adversity. In their moment of truth, they took a hyper stand. They took their stance. They chose to have a strong and good foundation so that they could have a relaxed confidence that comes from that base. When you've got that foundation, the opposite of what the devil wants to do in your trials comes to pass. You have to understand that both God and Satan have a plan for you in your struggles. Both God and Satan have a plan for you in your adversity. Satan wants you to throw in the towel and just pack it in. Just quit, baby. Like, forget all this junk. I thought God was going to be good to me. I thought following Jesus was going to bring some joy and happiness into my life. I thought it was going to be good. Satan wants you to bail on that. Satan wants you to bail on Jesus, to bail on Christianity. Satan wants to take you out with trials, with sufferings. God, on the other hand, wants to develop you, to build you in trials, sufferings, difficulties. He wants you in your trials to know, I'm being developed here so that I can have a really solid root system, right, that goes deep and wide, so that I can have a strong foundation, a firm foundation in order to have that relaxed confidence. I'm not going to be taken out by this storm because my roots are firmly planted. That storm's not going to, I don't want to go through it, but it's not going to take me down. God's making me more like Jesus Christ. He's giving me the opportunity to become more like Him. And then he points to this ultimate example. Remember what it was in those verses? He says, remember Job? Do you remember Job? Do you remember what he went through? If you've never read the Old Testament book of Job, first half of the Bible, pre-Jesus stuff, there's a dude named Job. And Job had a lot of stuff. Life was good. He was healthy, wealthy, many, many children. He had lands, he had cattle. He was living well, and he had a heart for God. And on a single day, on the same day, he lost all of his wealth. He lost everything that he owned. All of his sons, 7 sons, and 3 daughters, all killed on the same day. Everything hit on the same day. And then it followed up where he lost his health, and he failed miserably with his health. It got so bad that his wife came to him one day and said, I don't know what you did, but you should just curse God and die. That was the advice of his loving wife. Curse God and die. You read the book of Job, and early on you think, man, why did Satan not take out his wife? Took out all of his family. And then you realize she was on his side. You listen to her talk, and it's like she's on Satan's team. And yet Job, in the midst of all of that, what did he do? Great book. One of the most amazing things, actually what he said to his wife in that moment. He says, shall we receive good from God only and not difficulty? Should we only receive good and not trouble? Shall we receive good only and not evil? And at ground zero, where that guy's life was just a total dumpster fire, it was so done in disaster, he said this, he said, blessed be the name of the Lord. In the midst of trials that we can't imagine. James says, think about Job's patience. Job had no idea why he was suffering. He didn't understand any of it. He had no clue why it was happening, but he knew who was in charge. One of the most amazing verses in the book of Job, and Job is just this honest, raw book that's full of confusion and it's full of pain, and he doesn't know why, and he doesn't understand. He was completely bewildered. He was in shock, and he's asking God these difficult, crazy, difficult questions, and he's just pouring his heart out and giving it all to God. He's just giving God all of his hurt and all of his pain, and one of the most amazing confessions of faith comes in verse 25 of chapter 19. And here's what he says. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives, that my rescuer lives. I know that my Savior lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, I know this, in my flesh, I will see God. What's he saying? He's saying, I can go through all of this. I can put up with everything. I can have the patience to stand, to hyperstand through all of this because I know that the judge is at the door. It's the same thing that James was saying. I know that the judge is at the door. I know that whatever happens here, he's not far. He's up to something. I'm going to stand before him ultimately. God will have the last word in every situation, and he will in my situation. So Job says, I don't know why this is happening to me. I don't know why I'm going through all of this, but I do know who's in charge. And I have a relaxed confidence in him. Chapter 23, getting near the end of Job, in verse 10, he says this, but he knows the way that I take. He knows where I'm going. He knows whether I'm going to lean into him or bail on him. Am I going to lean into God, or am I going to lean into Satan? Am I going to let myself be developed in my character and everything? Or am I going to just say, to heck with this whole thing and bye-bye God, I'm done with this? He knows the way that I take. And when he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. That's incredible to me. Job doesn't know why, but he's so patient because he knew who. And therefore he could believe despite what was taking place. And when this is all done, he says, I'm going to come forth as gold. I'm being refined right now. Let me tell you, I'm in the fire right now. But on the other side, I'm coming through as gold. The product of my life is, in fact, being made through the process of my life. That's what I'm going through. That's the process. So I'm going to come forth like gold because God wins in the end. I know the who. I've got no clue why, but I'm going to trust who? God. Even if it takes me out, because he's trying to make gold out of me. How do you make gold out of somebody? Fire. You turn up the heat. There's a picture here that I want to show you. Coming? There it is. This is a lodgepole pine. Have you seen one? They're everywhere in our province. I didn't know this. I've learned more about lodgepole pine trees this week than I've ever known in my entire life. That lodgepole pine, you may not know, that tree is the official tree of the province of Alberta, the lodgepole pine. They're everywhere. They're all over the place. They can grow in right conditions. They can grow up to 150 feet tall. Average out usually around 100, but in amazing conditions, they can hit up to even 160 feet. And they're amazing because a mature lodgepole pine tree can produce as many as 400 pine cones in a single year. But those pine cones are completely ineffective in creating new lodgepole pine trees. Here's what a lodgepole, beat me to it. This is what a lodgepole pine cone looks like. Have you seen one of those? They're hard as a rock. They're perfect to throw at people. I've heard. As kids, camping and stuff, we'd throw those at. I lived in Tennessee for a while, and there was these acorn things that would hit the ground, and I had a hockey stick down there because why wouldn't you? And so I would be walking to school, which was a few blocks away. I'd just be shooting those things everywhere. I'd fire them at all kinds of things. And these things are perfect. They're hard as a rock. There's a resin. These trees, they know what they're doing. There's a resin around these things. They're sealed in there. There's nothing that's going to get those seeds out. They're all completely sealed. These things can't sprout at all. They're kind of useless in terms of reproducing another lodgepole pine. The only way they're opened up is through fire. Those things could stay on a tree for 10 to 20 years, waiting for a fire. We don't get the kind of temperatures that would be hot enough or last long enough for those things to pop open by themselves. So they're waiting for a fire. Here's what one looks like after it's been burned. When fire comes through, the resin melts and those things explode. Guess what comes out? Seeds. Tons of them. They just shoot out of the pine cone. Only under fire. Only under that intense heat and pressure. Which is why always in areas where there are lodgepole pine trees, if there is a forest fire that ravages and comes through, as we know that that's happened all through our forests in the last few years, whenever there's lodgepole pines, the first thing to restore in that area is lodgepole pines because there's seeds everywhere. It takes a fire to open up what's on the inside. Gee, I wonder where he's going with that. It takes a fire to open up what's on the inside. It takes that adversity It takes that struggle. It takes that pressure. It takes that difficulty to open up what's on the inside. The process is the product. God is wanting desperately to bring you forth as gold. And James says, be patient. Don't give up. Stay the course. And you will watch your life become this beautiful gift. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for the words of James. These words that we can lean into thousands of years later, and they're still like exactly pertinent and applicable for us here today. God, there's so much adversity in this room. There are so many things that we're all dealing with, and we've all got our own stories, and man, God, it's just brutal sometimes. You know the challenge. We know that you went through difficulties like we can't hardly imagine during your time here on earth as Jesus. Father, would you help us to hyperstand? To, as James says, find that patience, that relaxed confidence in you. That like Job, it wouldn't be a matter of why is this happening, but it would be a matter of who's in charge, and that we could lean into that. God, that is our prayer. And some of us here today, God, we've never said yes to you. We've never crossed that line of faith and said, I want to follow you. And maybe today's your day. You can just pray with me this simple prayer. Just, God, I want to give my life to you. I've been going my way. That doesn't work so well. But God, I want to give my life to you. I want to repent. I want to turn away from living for myself. And I want to start living for you. I want to put you first. I want to live for you. I want to give myself fully to you, God, and I want to invite you into my life to do what only you can do. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.